Today is the 9th of August, 2016. The title is Hillary versus Trump. Since 21 July, the classic close of the Republican convention, and this goes right into the Democratic convention. The two conventions are going to be touched on together, more or less. The discussion is with Dave DeWitt, reporter from the Athens News, and I am Robert Whaley, retired historian from Ohio University. And this is the Athens Speakout, number 376. And by way of introduction, I would like to go over this calendar again because it's been a long time. The Philadelphia Convention went from Tuesday, the 23rd of July, to the 28th of July. And Trump closed, we were closing last time with a discussion of Trump and in Cleveland. And I want to come back to that theme. And then, so we're going to join the two conventions together. And then slowly we'll get up to date. But right now we're a little bit behind with the latest news. Okay, the mass media were mostly against Trump. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the liberal magazines, The Nation, The New Republic, the New York Review of Books, the London Review of Books, the TLS, papers that I take seriously. And I read the polls from the point of view of history. And history and political science and economics and philosophy are interwoven together. And that makes me a critic of CIA, Korean War, Iraq War, Afghanistan wars, and I have a bias on the side of peace against CIA reports. But making this public, the CIA has a very good reputation as a scholarly organization because they print statistics from 161 countries. You know, things like the gross domestic
the CIA fact book.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact book is a great resource.
Right. The gross national product, the name of the various heads of state, whether they're ruled by a prime minister, a president, or a king.
Demographics.
Right.
All sorts of, yeah.
Right. But they are not competent to talk about the liberals versus the conservatives. And they blur those ideological statements. And the voters have to clarify the differences between the Democrats, the Republicans, the liberals, and the conservatives. Anyway, the CIA began as part of the Truman Defense Department, created in 1947, and that has changed campaigning. And the campaign between Trump and Hillary is opening up the question of peace and war. And we ended last time with a statement of a pundit or journalist by the name of Cal Thomas. And Cal Thomas spoke in the Cleveland Convention, and he writes for the Chicago Tribune Creators Group. Now, that was new to me because the Chicago Tribune newspaper is a different organization than the Creators Group. And the Creators Group is a special internet service for TV journalists.
Yeah, syndicated columnists.
Yeah.
One person that I always think of when I think of creators is Connie Schultz.
Yeah.
Who is the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, formerly of the
Right.
Cleveland Plain Dealer and
Right. Right.
wife to Senator Sherrod
Well,
Brown.
good. Anyway, Thomas prints a few words on the campaign for this network. And this is because Trump will not talk to the established newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, and the Chicago Tribune newspaper. Trump dismisses these all as political correctness. And political correctness is a polite word for propaganda. So I would like to come to a column written by Cal Thomas called Campaign Conversion, with a question mark. And what he says in that column is that he's trying to talk about political correctness as propaganda. And he's trying to talk about the differences between his analysis and the New York Times. Anyway, so I'm going to kind of review that statement. I'm going to go back to that text. Cal Thomas called Campaign Conversion. Now, Cal Thomas is a rather old-fashioned Presbyterian who is trying to raise some points about what Trump really means by his Presbyterianism. So that's why I followed this article in some detail, because 1/3 of this column has got actual quotes from Donald Trump. And that's the advantage of Cal Thomas's interview of Donald Trump, because the New York Times gives its own editorials on this. This is why I underlined what this article said. But it's rather confusing. So anyway, the Athens Messenger reprinted this, and I looked up from the point of view of paragraphs and words. And so that's why I took it very seriously. Now, I went back to the biography of Cal Thomas. He was born in 1942 in Washington, D.C., and his full name is John Calvin Thomas. Now, the original John Calvin was the author of the most famous Protestant work in theology called The Institutes of the Christian Religion, published in 1536. And Calvinism and the various offshoots of Calvinistic denominations were the major philosophy of most Protestant denominations up to 1917. Now, after the First World War, Calvinism, Presbyterianism, Congregationalism began to run into some criticism because of First World War. But the New York State Dutch Reformed Church is a branch of the Calvinist faith. The French Huguenots are Calvinists, and they were expelled from France by Louis XIV in 1685, and many of these French Huguenots became the founding fathers, working for George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and the 6 important Deist presidents. Well, as I say, Calvinism reached a height with the founding fathers in Philadelphia, but since 1917, John Calvin Thomas is a kind of old-fashioned reporter. Anyway, he has this title, Campaign Conversion ? Cal Thomas is not sure whether he's going to support Trump or not.
Yeah. Well,
Did you have a question or a comment here?
I had a comment, and we had a discussion the other day about you know, sometimes Cal Thomas appears in the paper with somebody, and you thought it was Ed Beckel. It was Ed Beckel. I did check on that.
Okay.
I don't know what Ed's doing now, but maybe Cal's on his own, but they used to appear. They would give you the
Okay.
left side of things and the right side.
Yeah, well, Cal Thomas is a right-wing reporter,
Oh, no doubt about that.
and he's some kind of a Christian. I'm not sure exactly what his interpretation is. The big question today is, what is American society going to do about issues? Are they going to go into war, or are they going to stay out of there?
So is Cal Thomas a Presbyterian?
I would think he is, but he
Okay.
hadn't officially said so.
Because but he doesn't know if he's supporting Trump or not.
He's giving favorable comment.
Okay. Well, I
quoting
found
Trump.
it interesting I was researching some of Trump's religious, affiliation myself.
Right.
And Trump claims that he's a Presbyterian and that he attends the Marble Collegiate Church in Manhattan. But the Marble Collegiate Church itself has released a statement saying that he's not an active member.
Yeah. And Cal Thomas says that.
And the Marble Collegiate Church, which it's a long-standing church in Manhattan. It was founded in 1628. It's one of the oldest continuous Protestant denominations in the country. It's part of the Reformed Church movement. And Trump continually expresses his admiration for Dr. Norman Vincent Peale,
Yeah.
who's the author of the self-help book, The Power of Positive Thinking.
Yes.
And he was the pastor at Marble Collegiate Church
Very
for
good.
52 years from 1932 until
Very
1984.
good. You've done more research than I have.
And he died in 1993. And Trump references Peale so often, actually, that the Peale family has come out and asked him to stop.
That is very interesting.
So he claims to be a Presbyterian who attends this church, and he references Peale all the time, and both the church and the Peale family
Yeah.
have come out, in essence, against
That's
Trump.
amazing. That's amazing.
I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, there's a lot of people that claim to be members of such and such churches, and they might attend once or twice a year, and that's
Right.
probably the case with him.
Well, and that's what I was curious about, because it was just, I was having a
Perhaps
hard
his
time
daughter
fathoming
married there or
Donald
something,
Trump
you know.
making it to church every Sunday.
Right, yeah.
And for, maybe
That
that's
would
not
be
fair,
quite-
so I
yeah.
had to look it up and
Yeah.
find out.
Exactly.
And it turns out that the church did release a statement saying that, he's not an active member. So I guess
You
he's an
know what?
inactive
I've
member.
read
I don't know.
that book, The Power of Positive Thinking,
Yeah.
probably 30
Oh, have
years
you?
ago.
I've never read it.
And it's actually a very good
It was a
book.
number one
Sure.
bestseller in
Very good
1948
book,
when I went to college.
Yeah, I remember
So
hearing
he
of the
might
book.
use that as a reference book,
And I believe his admiration for it,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah.
As just like many other, probably millions of other Americans too. But,
Well, I don't think Hillary has any objection to the power of positive thinking.
No, I don't think she stands in opposition to it.
So what is the debate? But anyway, getting back to this Trump article, he quotes, that is, Cal Thomas quotes, a book written by C.S. Lewis called Mere Christianity, published in 1952. And
C.S. Lewis had a lot of Christian-based themes.
he
in
was
his
a
work.
devout Church of Anglican. He taught at
Anglican,
Oxford.
yeah.
He was an Anglican. But he taught literature at Oxford.
Mm-hmm.
And he died in 1963. And in 1952, Cal Thomas says Mere Christianity was one of his great books. But Trump...
I preferred the Screw Tape Letters myself.
Well, I have never read the Screw Tape Letters, but my favorite book I brought here.
Oh,
This is called The Four Loves
okay, yeah.
by C.S. Lewis. And this goes back to the New Testament. It goes back to the Apostle Paul.
Right?
The problem with the English translation is that the word love is very ambiguous and vague.
Yeah. Well,
And
there's
when
different types of love.
when the New Testament was written,
Eros.
There were
agape.
3 loves. Now, C.S. Lewis says there are 4. But let's talk about the 3 loves. We had a...
Coca-Cola.
No, that's affection. That's a false love. That's a love of idols, okay? And that's what C.S. Lewis talks about as the 4th love.
Like,
but
quotes
the
John Donne.
the 3 famous loves of Paul are friendship, Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. And that became the theme of the Democratic Convention. That's the kind of love they were talking
The
about.
city of brotherly love, right?
Yeah, fellow, that's love. That's love of friends. And then there is agape, which means
Right.
charity.
Charity
It
for
means
everyone,
love
love
your
for
neighbor,
everyone.
love the poor, love the sick. This is what Jesus Christ was talking about. When he was talking about love, he was mostly talking about agape.
So, is he just rounding? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Finish
Anyway,
first.
The third love is what the American society is obsessed with. It's
Eros.
called eros.
Yeah.
And these people are obsessed. That is, the generation since my graduation from high school and the generation since Norman Vincent Peale. And I think that Cal Thomas is still in that old-fashioned generation. Anyway, eros means sexuality in today's parlance.
Right.
And that is
So,
very controversial.
What has
Okay.
he done with? Has he like? So it sounds like he's cribbed these down from the ancient Greek.
Well,
6 loves. There's 6 loves in ancient Greece.
what are they?
Eros, Philia, Ludus, Agape, Pragma,
Ludus,
and
he doesn't discuss, and I don't know anything
Philautia.
about- What is it called?
Philautia, which is the love of self.
Oh, self-love. Okay.
Pragma is long-standing love.
Self-love is
Agape is charity love
okay.
for everyone.
Self-love was condemned by the Pope as pride.
Yeah.
Now that may well.
So they're in the conflict with
yeah,
Christianity.
that's kind of a maniac.
Yeah.
Love of yourself.
Well, I think that's the one
a
that Donald
deadly-
Trump's got.
Yeah, that's a deadly sin. But Lewis doesn't discuss that, and
Yeah.
I never discuss this. So you've done more research than C.S.
Well,
Lewis.
I'm sure he's familiar with the Greek. I mean, he wrote a book called The Four Loves. I'm sure he was familiar with the ancient Greek
Right,
philosophies on that.
right. Okay, do you want to say anything more about the Four Loves, or C.S. Lewis, or the Screw Tape Letters, or Trump?
Well, I could talk about the Screw Tape Letters. Is great work.
Okay, what does it say? I didn't
Well,
really...
the Screw Tape Letters is written as a series of correspondence from an apprentice devil who is trying to tempt a
It's
person.
fiction. It's a novel.
It's fiction, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Written as a series of letters from
Sort of
Uncle
like Faust,
Screwtape.
a kind of a Faust.
Yeah, and they're trying to tempt this person into leading a life
Of sin.
Of sin, right?
Yeah.
And they're strategizing as the best way to tempt this person, and it's actually a really humorous novel.
I see.
But that's my favorite C.S. Lewis work.
Well, I read this book.
For whatever that's worth.
It took me 2 weeks to read it, word for word.
Yeah.
And I was greatly enlightened because when I left high school, I was a very naive Christian. And you might call me a fundamentalist or a conservative Christian. And I believed my mother. But then when I went away to college, you become, and most people, when they go away to college, they get a more sophisticated interpretation of the complexities of what Jesus and Paul and Jeremiah and all of the various Old Testament and New Testament prophets were talking about. And very, very few people are qualified to be a priest or a minister, and that's a
Yes.
special study.
Just what exactly did happen to Paul on the road to Damascus?
Right.
What year did you read that book, Robert?
Well, I read it.
You didn't read it at Bates?
No. My wife discovered it.
Oh, okay.
When I met my wife, she was Episcopalian, and she was always quoting the screw tape letters to me.
Yeah.
Well, I was a full blast historian, and I had no time for fiction.
Oh, that right.
She read plenty of novels, all kinds of novels because her mother was a student of English from Berkeley and taught school, but English was her strong suit. And that's the strong suit of Lewis.
And I don't know about you two guys, but when it comes to when I ask somebody, well, you know, what books or writings have inspired you,
Right.
in life, his name always comes up.
C.S. Lewis,
Yeah.
right. Well, I had never heard of it until I met Lois. And Lois was going to the Canterbury House, which was a Episcopalian club for
There at Ann Arbor.
in Ann Arbor, Michigan, right.
Yeah.
Now, these Westminster House was for the Presbyterians. The Methodists had a Wesleyan house.
Yeah.
Well, most of these houses have all been closed because of the New Left, the 1960s, and the repudiation of general Christianity.
No, the Canterbury House has hung around for a while because
It's still here in Athens?
No. I mean, on the Ann Arbor campus.
Oh, on the Ann Arbor campus. That I don't know.
I remember seeing an old. Well, it's been years. But
Oh,
what I'm
it's been
saying,
some-
It probably went into the 70s anyway because I saw Neil Young play there at the Canterbury House.
You did?
On the Ann Arbor.
What year was that?
That was probably 1971 or so.
Okay. All right. Very
But
good.
like I said, that's been a long time.
Right.
But-
Well, the Westminster House in Athens became the United Campus Ministry. And they're more interested in sex than in religion.
Did the name Canterbury come from like Canterbury Tales?
No. When Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church over his divorce from Catherine of Aragon, and he was condemned by the Pope, but the head bishopric, the head Archbishop of England, was the Archbishop of Canterbury. So what Henry VIII did said, okay, I'm going to appoint my own bishop.
Was that Sir Thomas More, or was that the one before him?
Thomas More was a chancellor.
Oh, right.
A chancellor is a secular leader.
What was the other
Are you
guy's
talking
name?
about Sir Thomas More that wrote Utopia?
Yeah, that's the same guy.
Yeah, but he.
Henry VIII had him. Henry VIII had him executed in 15.
Really?
Oh, yes.
But who was that advisor before him? It was the bishop, right? What was his name?
Well, it was Bishop Thomas Cranmer who took.
That's it. It was another Thomas.
Yeah, he took over from the Archbishop of Canterbury
Yeah.
and took over from Cardinal Wolsey and took over from the Catholic
Wolsey
Church.
is the other guy I was thinking of.
So Henry VIII was in trouble with the Roman Catholic Church
Yeah.
because Henry VIII had married a severe, loyal Roman Catholic by the name of Catherine of Aragon in Spain.
Okay.
Okay?
But I got this question and I'll let you go on. But
Yeah.
the thing is, why did they kill Thomas More?
Why did Henry VIII?
Yeah.
Because Henry VIII had repudiated the Pope when he
Right.
decided to divorce Catherine.
So everyone had to swear a loyalty.
That's right.
oath
So he
to
says
the
to the
new-
Chancellor, Thomas, do you support me? And Thomas says, no, I remain a Catholic.
And he threw him in the Tower of London.
Threw him in
right?
the but for treason, for disobeying Henry VIII on secular grounds. If you commit heresy, you're burned at the stake. If you commit treason, you're beheaded.
Right.
Treason is a secular crime against the king.
Well, what did he think?
So he just refused-
He was just so stuck to his
Who, Henry
religious
VIII?
convictions? No,
Thomas More, yeah.
Henry
What the
More was an
consequences
idealist. He
were.
was a
He
philosopher.
did know the consequences. He had letters. There's letters from him when he was in the Tower of London.
Now, he was
and
a man
he
of
just
conscience.
refused. He refused to repudiate
And they
the
made
Catholic
a
Church.
film about that, The Man for All Seasons.
I-
And they show Thomas at his trial. And this guy, Thomas Cranmer, walks back, and Cranmer says to him, Thomas says to him, oh, by the way, what is this big medallion on your chest? Oh, he says, I've been made Chancellor of the Exchequer for Ireland. And then Trump says, well, Judas was betrayed for 30 pence of silver, and you've done it for the Chancellorship of Ireland. Good luck to you. That was a famous scene. The Man for All Seasons.
I've never seen that. I'll
Never
have to
saw
watch
the film?
that.
It's
No.
a great film.
No, yeah, I've seen documentaries on Thomas More.
It makes Sir Thomas More a hero, and then he was called Sir Thomas More
Right.
in Henry VIII's day. But then the Roman Catholic Church in the 20th century made Sir Thomas More a saint.
Oh, okay.
So in the Catholic Church, he's a saint.
Saint Thomas
Thomas
More,
More
right.
for standing up to Henry VIII over the disestablishment of the Roman Catholic Church in England. And
Right.
then Henry had problems with 6 wives.
Right.
He had married Anne
'Cause
Boleyn
After Aragon, right?
and she was
Anne
pregnant,
Boleyn.
and he thought that Anne Boleyn was going to give him a son. So Anne Boleyn goes to the Tower. See, he had a crazy theory based on Leviticus. Leviticus is a book written by the ancient Jews.
I remember, I know.
And it has
Leviticus.
all kinds of rules.
Yeah.
That if your husband dies, can you marry your brother-in-law?
Oh, it's got all. That's the one that they usually cite to, but it's got all the like. You
It's got
can't
all these
touch
rules.
Pork.
Right.
You can sell your daughter into
Henry
slavery.
VIII
you
got
can-
these ministers
Yeah.
and priests to say, well, you read in Leviticus, she must have committed adultery. She must have had some kind of an adulterous affair with one of these things which are forbidden. So he believed that the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit could determine the sex of a child. That's what he believed. He was a male chauvinist. He was
Yeah.
a bit crazy.
Sure.
He says, I want a son, and if you were really loyal to me, you would produce a son.
Yeah.
You must be this loyal. Oh, he was crazy.
Yeah.
He's now called a male chauvinist. He's a tyrant. Every Protestant says, well, he led England toward the Protestant thing, but they don't regard Henry VIII as the hero.
Right.
The real hero is Elizabeth.
Right. Elizabethan.
Yeah,
England
yeah. Well,
and-
she was converted to more and more Calvinist theologians. So Henry VIII leaves a will when he dies. And he says, I have 3 heirs. The first is my son, Edward, and he gets the throne. He was the offspring of Jane Seymour, another Protestant, but he had bad health, and he only stayed on the throne till he was 15.
Right.
And then Catherine gets it, and then Elizabeth gets it.
And then Elizabeth. Yeah.
Well, Catherine had the unfortunate thing. I mean, Mary. Mary was the daughter of Catherine.
Mary, Queen of Scots.
No, Mary,
no.
Bloody Mary.
Oh, Bloody Mary.
Bloody
Okay.
Mary Tudor was her name.
Mary Tudor. Right.
Yeah.
They were all. This is all the House of Tudor.
This is all the House of Tudor. They're all descendants of Henry Tudor, Henry VIII. And the problem with Bloody Mary was that they had made a lot of Protestant converts under Jane Seymour, and they had confiscated a lot of monasteries and so forth and so on. So there were 300 Calvinist theologians in Oxford and Cambridge. So Bloody Mary, being loyal to the Catholic Church, decides to execute
Yeah.
these
She
people.
starts, and she executed Jane Seymour. Did
Yeah.
she not?
Yeah, probably did.
Yeah.
I don't remember the details of that. So that's how she got the name of Bloody Mary by Elizabeth and her descendants. And then, of course, the colony of Maryland was set up by Mary as a special colony for the Catholics. And Lord Baltimore and Lord Calvin were all Catholics. But unfortunately for the Catholic Church, there were too many rich Catholics in England who didn't want to go to the backwoods of Maryland. So eventually Maryland became an Anglican county by default.
Yeah, because they didn't have the population.
Didn't have the population. So that's how.
I went across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge there one time, and I was at a place called Queen Anne.
Yeah, that was named after Queen Anne of England. When Henry died, when Elizabeth died, she had no heirs. So they went into the House of Hanover. They went into the Stuart House. They changed dynasties. That was the end of the Tudors when when Elizabeth died. See. So that's the genealogy of the British
And
throne.
Hanover, Maryland would have got that name from.
Well, that Hanover was in Pennsylvania. Those are German families.
Yeah, there's
the.
a Hanover, Maryland.
Well, that must have been named later by some
Okay. Okay, yeah,
migrant from
there is the
Pennsylvania.
Hanover, Maryland, up
Yeah.
there by Lancaster.
Yeah, that's near the border.
Yeah,
That's near the border.
yeah.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Hanover was.
Just one more question before the break. The drink Bloody Mary came from.
Well, the Bloody Mary is a nickname of the alcoholic societies who want to make a popular drink of tomato juice and gin and
Right,
so forth and
right.
so on. And
But
they
I
called
was-
this Bloody Mary.
Yeah.
But
Gotcha.
that was never known in
There's
England.
no connection.
No, that was invented in the United States by the cocktail business. I don't know when the Bloody Mary was invented, but you could look up a history of cocktails and alcohol business.
Okay, it's time for.
Well, we spent a lot of time on religion, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
We didn't get very far,
It's
but
always good.
We-
This says that the name Bloody Mary is associated with a number of historical figures, particularly Queen Mary I of England,
right.
who
That's
was
it?
Bloody Mary.
But it doesn't say anything about the alcohol business,
Well,
the cocktail business.
yeah, I mean, there's some. It says
it
some
mi-
drink aficionados believe the inspiration for the name was Hollywood star Mary Pickford.
Hollywood.
Oh, there you go.
So-
Pickford.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like anyone really knows for sure, but
Yeah. Hollywood gossip.
let's just say that Mary I was the OG. She was the original.
Yeah, I think the cocktail was invented in the United States, not in England.
Yeah, it was. It says it was here. Yeah.
The English drink sherry. The English drink whiskey.
You need to identify yourself.
Oh, yeah. This is Robert Whaley, historian, and we are supposedly debating the Hillary-Trump campaign, but we have hardly begun because we got off on a tangent of a Protestant theologian by the name of John Calvin Thomas, who now goes by the name Cal Thomas and is kind of keeping his official religion a little bit quiet. And we got off into a tangent of how the English religious controversy led to the eventual founding of the United States. And when the United States was founded, Virginia was an Anglican colony. Maryland was officially a Catholic colony, but it really had a free constitution because the majority of the inhabitants were already Anglican. So Maryland calls itself a free state. And Pennsylvania was settled by the Quakers, and they became a free state. They were a free state before the federal constitution allowed free
Yeah, they were big advocates for the separation of church and state. At least William Penn
No,
was.
they still are called Commonwealths.
It's,
Yeah.
Commonwealth.
Virginia and Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania,
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, and Kentucky are commonwealths because this was during the reign of Oliver Cromwell, the Long Parliament, from 1640 to 1660. And since the King Charles II was restored, they pretended there was no revolution, there was no Commonwealth. So they called this the Long Parliament. And the Long Parliament was officially in session for 20 years. So there was the Long Parliament and the Short Parliament.
That's a long parliament.
There was a Short Parliament. The Short Parliament only had 40 members who executed the king.
Right.
So Virginia and Tennessee, I'm not Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky, Massachusetts were sympathetic to their colonial constitutions to the Commonwealth because the Commonwealth is the beginning of the idea of republicanism. It means commonwealth. It has a certain communist socialistic tendency. The lands of the peasants belong to the common community, the House of Commons. So the House of Commons and the Commonwealth and community and communism are related linguistically. Well, it was a good reminder of the complexities of religion and politics. Well, anyway, we've made the identification. Where are we now? We've finished with C.S. Lewis, I guess, and Donald Trump, unless you want to say anything more about that.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'm good to go.
One more quote from Cal Thomas, which is kind of up to date, July 2006. He quotes a recent theologian by the name of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Do you know anything about him and why he was quoted?
Oh, no, I wanted...
Have you ever heard of the Gulag?
Yes.
What is the Gulag?
The Gulag was Stalin's incarceration
It
system.
meant concentration camps. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn
He
was
wrote that famous book. What was the title to it?
Gulag Archipelago. He wrote a
Oh.
book, the Gulag Archipelago.
He was
He was sent to the concentration camp by Stalin,
Okay.
but he remained an Orthodox Catholic. A Orthodox.
Oh, was this part of Stalin's attempt
This is an
to
underground- this is-
eviscerate all religion?
Yeah, Stalin was an atheist. And he
Well, yeah, he essentially wanted the state to be the religion.
He
He
made
wanted
communism, that's right.
no competition with his power.
So Alexander Solzhenitsyn went into jail in 1918, and he stayed there for 20 years. Now, in 1956, after Stalin was dead, communism begins to get a little more liberal under Khrushchev, and they begin to talk about de-Stalinization. Okay,
Right.
so he's let out of jail after serving 38 years, and then he wrote this story of his jailing, and he became a hero in the United States. He left the Soviet Union. He came to the United States and was lionized by the conservatives who saw him as a Christian martyr.
Right.
But he was quoting Jesus Christ and Shakespeare and Martin Luther King, and Calvin Thomas still remembers him. That's what I'm saying.
I can remember I was in high school and he did all the talk show circuits and
Yeah,
everything, you know.
right. And he settled in Vermont, and he eventually got tired of the United States as being too secular, and he went back to the new Russia and died there in Russia under Khrushchev or Brezhnev.
Brezhnev.
He said that religion is in trouble. And of course, that's a hero to Cal Thomas, who wants to preserve Christianity for the future of Western civilization. I guess that's the best way to make the importance of this. And I will close with my favorite statement from the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion, and establishment means tax assistance of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, abridging the freedom of speech, so forth and so on. So I believe in the broadest definition of Christianity. Any follower of Jesus can make his own definition of what is a Christian. And Cal Thomas, I would say, is a rather conservative Calvinist of some kind, but he's suspicious of Donald Trump. I think that's the conclusion here.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go on to another
You've got
topic.
Plenty of time.
We do?
Yeah.
I didn't think we did.
So, yeah, we've got about 20 minutes left.
20 minutes. Okay, well, we can go to the another question, the importance of Philadelphia as the ideal convention center for the Democrats. And we've already touched on this, the city of brotherly love. And this was the city of Benjamin Franklin, the wisest politician in the colonies. It's where the Constitution was drafted, where the Articles of Confederation were drafted. It was Jefferson and Madison, Jefferson and Adams and Benjamin Franklin who drafted
The Declaration of Independence.
Declaration of Independence. And then Franklin was the president of the old Articles of Confederation and had George Washington appointed as the commander-in-chief of the colonies. And he went up to defend Boston, Battle of Lexington and Concord.
Lexington.
And eventually, 1789, they draft a new constitution, the federal constitution. 55 members signed it from the 13 colonies. And Madison was the chief drafter of that, along
Father
with
of the
Alexander
Constitution.
Hamilton. And it was ratified in 1789 by 3/4 of the states. And Virginia and New York were some of the last two states to ratify. They had a lot of old-fashioned Tories in those states as Anglican colonies.
Yeah.
And the first state to sign it was Delaware,
Right.
which was a satellite of Pennsylvania. And the second state was Pennsylvania. They were the ones who wanted to push the federal Constitution. And Pennsylvania is now nicknamed the Keystone State. It's the keystone between the North and the South. The Mason-Dixon line, the southern boundary of Pennsylvania, is the Civil War line. So Pennsylvania and Maryland and Virginia are very important states, along with Massachusetts and New York, the leading states in the new Constitution. You want to say anything about the importance of the Philadelphia Convention to the New Democrats uniting under the city of brotherly love? The Democrats come out of that united as never before, and the Republicans come out divided as never before.
Yeah, I think it was.
It was an ideal artistry to have that convention.
Everything worked out perfectly for Hillary Clinton, and it's
Right.
been reflected in all of the polls ever since. Because I don't believe that Donald Trump has any impulse control.
Right.
He wasn't able to take a week full of speeches against him without responding to every single one. He came out and said he wanted to hit every single person who spoke against him, which is politically just so dense and naive and dumb, frankly, and it's reflected in everything that's happened since. I mean, he attacked a Gold Star family. A Gold Star family is people.
Save me from the veterans.
Yeah. He attacked he just made mistake after mistake, and I think it speaks to the real problem, the essential problem with his character, is that he can't keep his mouth shut even when it's manifestly in his
Right.
own best interest to do so. He has no impulse control. He can't do it. And so politically it was just a disaster for him because he just kept making mistake after mistake, going after the wrong people. And then even when he made these mistakes, like with the Khan family, he harped on it for 4 days. So it's not like he just came out once and made a mistake. He decided to keep the news cycle on that same mistake.
He has a thin skin.
He has an extreme paper thin. And politically it was
He's
disastrous for him.
a demagogue.
And now he's losing by double digits in national polls. He's losing by double digits in key states like Pennsylvania and Florida. And there's elected Republican senators are coming out against him. Elected Republican Congress people are coming out against him, endorsing Hillary. The former Republicans are announcing third-party bids for office.
Right.
He's just a disaster all the way around, and frankly, I'm enjoying it.
Well, we're outsiders. We can laugh.
Yeah.
But I don't think the Republican Party is laughing because they're worried about the future of the Senate.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at this rate, they are going to lose the Senate, too. And Hillary Clinton's not only going to be elected president, but she's going to have control over Congress for at least her first 2 years as well.
Right. Well, anyway, to change the subject slightly, the new question is, how did Hillary and Bernie Sanders patch up their differences during the primary? Do you know anything about that, or shall I quickly summarize that?
I'll let you summarize.
All right. Well, they had an argument over the platform committee. They had an argument over the credentials committee. And they agreed to a common agreement on Citizens United versus the FCC. This was a concession given to Bernie. Mm-hmm. And this is the Supreme Court case, which a lot of people in Athens is concerned with. This gives the corporations almost unlimited money power. And apparently the United Democratic Party is going to work on that in this campaign. How enthusiastic Hillary will be remains to be seen. And then the other big concession was that Hillary agreed that Debbie Wasserman Schultz Schultz-Wasserman of the DNC would end her career at the end of the week.
Right.
And she was replaced by Donna Brasilia.
Right.
And then, in my opinion, Hillary appointed the right vice president, the Virginia governor,
Tim Kaine.
Tim Kaine.
Yeah.
A lot of the Bernie supporters wanted another woman, Elizabeth Warren. But
Well, they wanted a
Another
flame-throwing
yeah,
progressive.
That's pushing it a little too far.
But I thought it was a smart move politically for her because it helps her solidify Virginia, which
Right.
is crucial for her.
Right.
Not that she wasn't already winning in the polls, but to
Well, she can't
solidify
be sure.
that. Yeah.
She can't be sure. She has to run scared.
And
Okay?
Tim Kaine is,
Reasonably well acquainted in the South.
yeah.
And that's going to help Florida and Virginia and probably North Carolina come back to the Democratic column.
Right.
So I think that the compromise was good, and I'm satisfied with that.
Yeah, plus he doesn't, like the problem with Elizabeth Warren or Sherrod Brown, for instance, is that they have Republican governors in their state who would
Right.
replace them with Republicans in the Senate, and she doesn't want to lose. She wants the Senate.
Yeah.
The Democrats want the Senate.
Well, we're going to come to the end with a long question, which we probably will not finish. But do you think Donald Trump is a fascist? That is worthy of some discussion.
I think that he definitely has authoritarian impulses, and he does not have regard for representative democracy. I don't think that he really even knows the philosophy very well behind
That's right.
representative democracy.
I think that's a very good answer.
And so I don't know if he would be familiar with the philosophies of fascism per se, but everything that I can tell about the talk about banning Muslims, the talk against a free press, the talk about bringing libel lawsuit and opening up the libel, he has authoritarian impulses that lead me to believe that he would run an administration that would definitely verge on fascism.
Okay.
Luckily, we have powers within our country. The powers of the executive branch are limited. And so there's a lot of
If we follow
stuff-
the Constitution.
If we follow the
Yeah,
Constitution,
but
absolutely.
the problem of the recent Republican Party is that they have undermined the Congress, both houses of Congress, and we had imperial presidents,
Absolutely.
beginning with Lyndon Johnson
Yeah.
and escalated by Richard Nixon
Yep.
and triumphed by George W. Bush.
Yeah.
So
And I think
democracy
Donald
is,
Trump would do things much worse than them.
Yeah, can't be. So I would avoid the word fascist at this point. But the United States does have fascist influences going back to the 1930s, going back to when Mussolini established fascism. And looking at history, we've had a Roman Catholic father by the name of Father Coughlin. You remember him?
Oh, yeah. He's a fascinating character in American history.
Okay, what did he do and why was he denounced?
Well-
and who denounced him?
Well, he started off, he had his radio show
In Oakland, Michigan.
in Oakland, Michigan. And he started off, he was kind of a populist, essentially.
He was a populist
He was
Catholic.
a populist Catholic, and
He was
but
Irish, and he had a big
verged
Irish
on
following.
demagoguery in a lot of ways.
That's
But he was also a fervent isolationist,
yes, that's right.
which brought him into deep conflict with the Roosevelt administration.
You got it. Right.
And that's where he ended
And
up.
Roosevelt had some influence with a Chicago cardinal. He was his favorite Catholic. Mm-hmm. And he said, I think his name was Mundelein. He said, can't you do something about this Coughlin?
Yeah.
In order to get the vote in 1936, Mundelein wanted the Catholic vote behind Roosevelt. So they defrocked Coughlin. He lost his so then they kept referring to Father Coughlin. He kept his radio show. They didn't say top his radio. He kept his, but then they always refer, that defrocked priest. And gradually he began to lose ground
Lose legitimacy,
by 1940.
Right.
Yeah, so he was a kind of a closet fascist.
Yeah.
And then we had Theodore Bilbo from Mississippi, a real racist from the populist, 1910 variety.
Right. Okay.
And he was still in the House of Representatives when I was a kid in 1948.
Oh wow.
Big racist.
Yeah.
Senator Theodore House of Representative Bilbo. And he was always quoted by all the social studies teachers. Mm-hmm. Well, are you going to support Bilbo? And that was an embarrassment for the Democratic Party.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it was still the Dixiecrats at that time.
Yeah, well, he was there before the Dixiecrats.
Right.
And I'm not sure when he died, but he kind of faded out in 1948. And Trump took, not Trump, but Thurman.
Strom Thurmond.
So he took over, and Bilbo was soon forgotten. But I can remember his name in 1947, 48 was my senior year. And then we have Senator Joseph R. McCarthy, who dominated the Congress between 1946 and 1957. And he was a demagogue who...
Oh, of the worst kind.
Yeah, and a lot of Jews thought he was anti-Semitic, and they thought he was a fascist. So he got that label.
And actually interesting, have you heard about, I've read just a little bit about this, I don't know, I haven't read too deeply so I can't talk about much, but Joe McCarthy had a right-hand man named Cohn.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump has some connections to Mr. Cohn.
Yeah.
Roy Cohn?
Yeah,
Roy
Roy Cohn, yeah. And I think, I forget what exactly their connections were. I was trying to find it here.
Okay, well, I'll give you
But go ahead.
the brief story.
Yeah. Oh, you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, because I was alive during the events.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So in 1950, General McCarthy had to, he was elected in 46. Mm-hmm. So he went to a father in Georgetown, Father Welch. And he said, Father Welch, what can I do to get reelected? And Father Welch, being a Pope Pius XII anti-communist, said, just start talking about communism. So he goes on, he just goes on the radio. Wheeling, West Virginia. And he says, I have in my hand, I have in my pocket, a list of State Department people who are communists.
Card-carrying communists. Yeah.
But this was said on radio. There was
Right.
no text,
Yeah.
just like Donald Trump. Well, the radio station lit up. He had calls. The station had calls from all over the United States. So then McCarthy got further TV shows, radio shows. TV really hadn't blossomed, a little bit on TV, but it was mostly radio. So he kept talking about communism and saying that, well, there weren't 205. I made a mistake. There were only 55. He kept reducing it a little bit. And he said, where'd you get the list? Well, I got the list from J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover linked it to the House Un-American Activities Committee. Mm-hmm. So there was a big crusade against McCarthyism and his exploitation of the fear of communism. Well, this whole thing appears in climax when McCarthy gets into trouble with Jews. McCarthy says, well, I'm going to end this anti-Semitic charge. I'm going to hire 2 Jews. I'm going to hire a Jew, one Jew. His name was Roy Cohn.
Oh, yeah.
And Roy Cohn, and he had a homosexual friend by the name of G. David Shine. Mm-hmm. Well, Shine and Cohn went around to all of the libraries in Europe to try and purge them of liberal books that were subversive and were leading toward communism.
Wow.
You got about 2 minutes. Right?
Yeah, and this led to the Army McCarthy hearings because
Yeah.
McCarthy escalates it. And he says, Dwight Eisenhower is part of the communist conspiracy because he has promoted a communist dentist by the name of Zwicker. So then they had these big complex hearings.
What I always wondered when I read about Joseph McCarthy was that, he was an alcoholic.
He was an
How
alcoholic.
often, like maybe on that Wheeling radio show or whatever, how often did he make these statements when he was under the influence?
Who knows? Who knows?
Because that's what he died of, was alcohol.
He died of alcoholism, although I think it escalated after he was censored.
Perhaps.
As a result of the Army McCarthy hearings, he was censored. 62 senators voted against him.
Yeah.
Then he lost his television audience.
Yeah.
He lost it. No, they were no longer listening to him.
Robert, we only have 1 minute.
Yeah, well, I think we're not going to finish this. But anyway, Trump has had previous demagogues and would-be fascists that we'll have to continue next time. And thank you for continuing this debate.
Thank you.
And we'll have to go another week.
We will. That's fine with me.